problem backing up people that might
We
even
have
turn
no
on NATO.
friends or enemies.
This is bad geostrategy.
No
and
friends
I think
or
every
enemies,
honest
only
Englishman would oppose
interest.
it.
What about Welshmen?
We have no
Welshmen,
friends
Irishmen,
or
Scotsmen,
enemies.
a
We
lot of them.
only have interests.
We don't have any enemies, we only have interests.
No friends and no enemies, only interest.
But surely,
You tell me the
He's too
politician
young
who
to
said that.
understand that.
well, I'm not young enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Robert, you mentioned the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes, I
Young and
did.
naive.
1962.
It shouldn't be called the Cuban Missile
You remember
Crisis. It
Harold
should be called the
Macmillan?
Turkish
You
Missile
remember
Crisis.
Harold Macmillan at the United Nations?
It shouldn't be called the Cuban. It should be called the Turkish Missile Crisis. The Russians put nuclear armed missiles in Cuba as a response to Americans putting nuclear armed missiles in Turkey. And this is what we're dealing with now today, in the current crisis in Ukraine. This is a direct result of NATO aggression.
What about Moldova?
Now, does that justify
Latvia,
Putin's
Lithuania,
despicable invasion? Of course not.
Armenia?
Of course not. It
What
doesn't
about the
justify
little
it.
countries?
I don't play whataboutism, okay? What I'm trying to do is give you guys a different perspective on British foreign policy and show how we're happy to support both sides. Like I said, so Richard Dearlove recommended Tony Blair go to the opera with Putin the week before he was elected. This was all the while Putin was happy to invade Chechnya and level ground to the ground.
It doesn't cost you anything.
I never ever heard any discussion of this. Never. I've hardly, only in the Daily Mail they talked about this, of all newspapers. Alright?
Only gays allowed. That's
Now I'm speaking
well
uncomfortable
documented,
truth. Now I'm speaking very inconvenient, uncomfortable
I
truth.
haven't clue what you're talking about.
I'm talking about Russia's invasion of Chechnya with
Talk
British
about
help.
their gay church.
When Britain was supporting Russia invading Chechnya, you were alive to see it, I'm sure. You remember it probably. Alright? I was very young and I don't remember seeing it.
Evil
But
empire.
I'm able to look. No, we're not an evil empire.
I'm talking about the
All
Ruskies.
empires are evil by definition.
We don't
alright?
want
But the
Russia.
British people are
We
evil.
don't want
I've said this again and again
Russification.
at Speaker's Corner. I'm not anti-British, not anti-American. I'm anti-American elites and I'm anti-British elites.
Are you anti-NATO?
I'm anti-NATO.
Yeah.
No, I think we should have children. That's a side. I don't want to get that. Trying to throw me off course. You're trying to derail this
We
discussion.
must
This is
stand
an important
up against
discussion and you're trying to derail it.
Russification.
I see what you're
No
trying to do.
Russification.
No Russification. In where?
Everywhere.
What is your vocation?
No Putinification.
Let their economy sink to the bogs of the world.
Nice for Russia.
Do you really think Russia's going to withstand these sanctions, my friend? They are.
Because
they
they've
may
been
not.
squirreling away gold.
And also, they're happy to. Britain and America still.
As
buy
I
Russian
said to
gas. No
Pavlov,
problem with that.
do a
We
bit of
don't. We
do a
don't.
bit of
Maybe not
se-
as
do a
German.
bit of selective bombing of shooting down their
Yeah, that's
aircraft
done.
in a few places. Not the whole war, but a few pockets where they need to be bombed out of
Are you
existence.
talking about Russia?
I'm talking about no-fly zones. You know what I'm talking
Well,
about.
the Ukrainians don't even have a no-fly zone.
I
so
think
don't
yes
know
they
why-
do.
Where'd you
You're
get
wrong.
that
He's
I
wrong.
read
Where'd
that.
you get that? We read that.
Sorry?
Zelensky, yes,
They-
you're right.
I read the news
Yes.
yesterday and they've changed today.
Zelensky wants
I might
no
have
fly
read different
zone.
news yesterday.
Zelensky wants no fly
You got
zone.
the letters wrong.
The most important news, I just had it, the most important news is that our Prime Minister is going to resign and he's going to take over Chelsea Football Club. He's offered a bottle of champagne and a packet of crisps.
That's true. I never heard. I've been getting
What flavour?
and criticizing Britain's relationship with the Russian oligarchs. There was a University of Virginia professor of international relations who just said that Britain is going to be the major drag on any sanctions on Russia.
Major drag.
Yeah, because
Drag queen.
because of the City of London's massive embeddedness
Yes,
in the
odds
Russian
one
oligarchy.
tonight.
The fact that we
It's-
train up all their children in public schools in Britain, we funnel launder all the
What
Russian
does
oligarchs'
the-
money. Now, to your credit, I have actually heard Steve speak about this and I say it's bad. The fact that Britain supports the Russian oligarchs. Britain has been doing it for years, no problem. All right, this just shows you that we're not the good guys and they're the bad guys. The elites are the bad guys in both countries. The British oligarchs, the Ukrainian oligarchs, and the Russian oligarchs. These are the enemies. These are the real enemies here.
What does the owner of the Evening Standard do? Who is
I don't read the
who
Evening
is
Standard, I don't read
who
trash.
is who is both Russian?
I use it for toilet paper, I don't
Russian,
use it for anything
Russian
else.
and British.
Why don't you use Android?
Russian.
I read the Metro, though.
Dual nationality. What does he do? And what do they do to him? Because he's got British nationality, is he kicked up the bum and told to
No,
pack
we
up?
shouldn't be sending Russians home. That's ridiculous.
Why
I
not?
think Steve and I agree on this as well. Why should we be sending Russian students, Russian people home? Why? What good is that going to do? Is that going to actually help the situation in Ukraine?
Well, leave things as they are then.
No, I don't say
We'll
leave things
make
as they
no
are.
impression.
I don't think I agree with sanctions either. The way that Russian people are already impoverished,
Sanctions.
teachers and social workers in Russia can
Sanctions
barely afford
work.
to eat already.
Sanctions.
And yet we're going to sanction them as events going to
Sanctions
help.
worked in your country of South Africa.
The sanctions work against Saddam Hussein? 1 second, please.
Work
Sanctions
against South
worked in
Africa.
One
South
second, please.
Africa.
One second,
Your
please.
country,
1
South
second.
Africa,
1
sanctions
second.
worked.
Sanctions, no, the sanctions didn't. The sanctions helped, but ultimately it was the South African
thank
people.
you very much.
So why can't the Russians go back and do the same thing?
Sorry?
Why can't the Russians go back and do the same thing?
in South Africa.
Exactly, yeah. Fight from within.
They are doing
Yeah.
that already. They've been doing that for years.
We've got
You've got a
Putin's
pussy riot and all
daughters
these
in
groups.
Europe. Why don't they go back?
Sorry?
Why don't they go back and fight from
I'm
within?
sorry, but Russia's a much more powerful country than South Africa has ever been. All right, it's not the same situation.
So what are you suggesting needs to be
South
done?
Africa relied almost entirely on the West.
So what
for
are you
its
suggesting
exports.
needs to be done with this situation?
I think we should massively condemn Russia, no doubt about it.
It's been done. We've done that.
Massively
Tick.
condemned. Say they're very, very naughty.
Call for de-escalation, the way China has done.
And
Tick,
then
we've
if
done
they
that.
ignore those
Next.
two things,
What else are we going to do? Nuclear war? Is that really what you want?
No,
what's
no,
your
I don't
next
want that.
step?
I don't
You've
want
given
that.
two. What's your next step if those first two?
Well, if we were going to sanction, and maybe we should, then we should sanction their energy resources
No,
as well. I don't think that Germany is being very two-faced about this. I don't think it's very fair to just sanction everything else except for energy. If you really want to hit them properly, then do it that way. But I'll
No,
just
but
tell you one
NATO
thing.
needs to
Sanctions didn't work on Iraq, okay? When the United Nations helped Britain and America sanction Iraq, a sanction in the 90s that killed 500,000 children under the age of 5, that sanction did nothing to stop Saddam Hussein, all right? Saddam Hussein came out stronger than that.
But nothing that you're proposing is going
Just
to
remember
work,
that another bit of history that's gone out the memory hole. The fact that Britain and
memory
America
hole?
pursued a genocidal
Where's
policy of
that?
sanctions. It's George Orwell's concept of memories that are inconvenient to state propagandists
He
today.
was related to
And-
Tony
and-
Blair.
George Orwell.
Eric Blair.
Eric Blair, no, he wasn't related. I hope to God he was not related to Tony Blair. No, you're saying
Blair
Putin
was
should be
Eric
put on
Blair.
trial for war crimes. I completely agree. We should try and capture him and put him on war trial. The way we did to Milosevic, the way we've done to some African dictators, the way we should do to Tony Blair as well, without a doubt. I'm not saying you can't criticize Russia before you criticize Britain's policies. I'm just saying we shouldn't be selectively humanitarian about this.
We're not killing opposition politicians, are we? We're not killing.
Actually,
we're
Britain
not
is.
killing journalists
Britain
to
is helping
speak
to
out
do that.
against Boris.
Britain is helping to
We're
do
not
that.
doing
We're
that.
doing it in Egypt. We're doing this in Indonesia. We've done it in Sri
So we've
Lanka.
killed journalists.
We've done it.
So we've killed journalists
We've
and
done it in
politicians.
Palestine and Israel. We do it everywhere. Britain supports most of the world's most brutal regimes against their
Oh, so
people.
we support people that do it. We don't do it ourselves.
No, you're
We
right,
don't
but
do it
you're
here in
right,
Britain. But you know we have denotices in Britain.
How can you compare the British state with Putin, who murders opposition politicians, who
No, it's
murders
just the
journalists,
people that
time
Britain
and time
murder,
and
you don't
time
care.
again?
You don't care about the people.
I
You
don't
did.
understand
Well,
what
as soon as I said that, you started spouting off about
I
Britain.
gave examples of
so
how Britain-
accept what I'm saying,
gave
rather than just saying,
examples.
yeah, but Britain's
I
done
gave
X, Y,
examples
Z.
of how Britain has supported.
You're an
some of the-
apologist. You're an apologist for Putin. Shame on you. Because you're an apologist. You get off. You're an apologist.
Talking about
I
the
just
Tudor
said-
times.
I've just been
When I point out something very, very
Before we get on the
bad,
ladder.
yes.
Can I have a turn afterwards? Can I have a turn afterwards, please?
Is it your
So,
ladder?
I'll turn off. Yeah, it is
your
my
ladder?
ladder. It is my ladder.
Oh, my lad.
This man is the Putin apologist. Get down.
Is that all you wanted to say? You
No,
can
no,
get
no,
down
no.
now.
Earlier, when Pavlov was speaking, and a guy in the audience
You're
said, "But what?
shaking with
Why,
anger. You're
why are
quaking-
you?"
quaking with anger.
It was cold and it's high. I don't like heights. When Pavlov was talking, there was a guy in the audience that said, "But why are you telling this? None of us are pro-Putin." That is absolutely incorrect. There are
None of us are
pro-Putin people
None of
everywhere.
us are pro-Putin.
I was quite involved in the freedom movement against the COVID restrictions and lockdowns, etc. And I'm ashamed to say that vast swathes of what called themselves the freedom movement are now spouting Putin propaganda. They're coming out with the bollocks that Putin is, the lies that
If he
Putin
just
is
says
spreading around the
anything
world.
that doesn't align with the narrative you're calling him
let me
pro-Putin.
carry on. Let me carry on. So
doesn't make
a
sense.
lot of people in the freedom movement are doing this. A lot of people on the far left are doing it, which is probably the camp that you're
No,
in.
I'm not, I'm
Do you know,
not.
Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn was due to speak on LBC a few days ago. He pulled out because he knew
already condemned
because he
Putin.
knew the embarrassment.
He's already
of it.
condemned
So the
Putin.
far left
Just
are
ignoring
swallowing
history,
the,
just
the
condemn
far
Putin a
left
week
are
ago.
swallowing Putin propaganda. The far right are swallowing Putin propaganda. From all sides, people are swallowing Putin.
Well, I'm
Putin-
not.
Well done, Robert. And I think that it's shocking. There are still, I've heard people say it today. that Ukraine is a neo-Nazi country, that Zelensky is a Nazi. Absolute nonsense.
I've never heard anyone
They're
say this.
spouting the lies that Putin
It
is
has lots
pushing
of
out.
neo-Nazis in it, though, and they tolerate it.
What's true that some of the Ukrainians are on Hitler's side, some of them.
Well, probably some of the Metropolitan Police Force were on Hitler's
That's
side, but
right,
it doesn't
you're
mean the
right.
Metropolitan Police Force is a neo-Nazi outfit.
I agree with that.
It is nonsense to suggest Ukraine is a neo-Nazi country. Sheer, utter
Well, I agree,
nonsense.
yes.
I haven't started yet. And on to that we should all be focusing on the reasons for this conflict. And in my view, the reasons are nothing to do with NATO.
narcissism.
Nothing to do with the EU. The reasons, Putin is said on record, I'm not making this up, I'm not theorising, I'm not guessing. Putin has stated on record he wants to reinstigate the Russian Empire. He has said that on record. That is now what he's doing. He did it in Georgia, he did it in Crimea.
Chechnya.
Both
You
he
ignore
did it in
Chechnya.
Chechnya. But all of these, all
British help. With British
all
help.
of this shut up. All of these
just
scenarios,
shut
the
up.
world,
Is that all you can say?
including us, turned a blind eye.
Is that the best you can do?
world has turned a blind
Tony
eye
Blair
to
did more than turn a blind
Putin
eye.
invading
If you're
country
using
after
that
country
historical-
after
if you're
country.
using
Tony
that
Blair did more than turn a blind eye.
historical reference, right? You've got
Which
to understand-
historical reference?
Well, the fact that he wants to create the.
Well, it's not historical. He
did
said
say
it
it.
very
He
recently.
said
No,
it.
no,
He said
I'm
it very
talking
recently.
about that he's using the Russian history,
Right.
right? So you've got to understand.
No, you don't have to you don't have to understand the Russian history to say it's wrong for a state, for a tyrant to invade other
What I'm saying,
independent
what
states.
I'm saying,
You don't have to understand
what I'm trying to
history.
say
That
to
is
you-
excusing it.
No, no.
That is
What I'm trying to
excusing
say
it.
to you is that it's not just him, is it? If
Well,
you,
it's
if
not.
there's some people, if some
I think
people
largely
ad-
it is him,
Right,
but I'm
so
sure
if
there are some people around
If
it.
some people advocate as to assassinate, do you think that would be the end of the matter?
Yes.
It would help. It would
Yes,
help, yeah.
absolutely.
No,
I
there's a
have
whole
strong
cabal.
confidence in
There's
that
a
point.
whole cabal. Just like
There
just
will be a
like
cabal,
him.
but basically what happens, and I think any individual, any man, it's usually men, that end up in power for a long time, you know, there's a whole litany of examples
Well,
of
Margaret
this.
Thatcher.
She wasn't in power.
10
for-
years. 10 years is quite a long time.
Putin's been in power for longer than that, and he wants to remain in power. The
Queen.
power corrupts, and often with men, like Putin, short men in particular, it goes to their heads. It does send them doolally. And I think there is no hope with Putin in power.
The point
tends
that
to
I'm
corrupt,
making
yeah.
is
Lord
it's
Acton,
the
power tends to corrupt.
cultural, it's in the cultural DNA
For
of the Russian
what,
people.
what, invading other states?
No, but they have been invaded historically more than any other
Kiev
country.
used to be, before Moscow even existed,
Yeah.
Kiev was the capital of the Ukrainian Russian.
Did you watch Oliver Stone's film about I mean, it's hard to summarise, but he said that Obama was basically funded a Nazi group to join that thing, and they were shooting people.
Who was shooting who?
Some Nazi group started shooting at the police during that.
Where? In Ukraine?
During the revolution in 2014, when the pro-Russian guy went out and Zelensky, I think, came in. And he says that they were using a neo-Nazi group who are historically on the border of Poland and Ukraine. And he said that they were using.
But that doesn't demonstrate Ukraine is a Nazi state.
No,
today,
I'm not.
does
I'm
it?
not.
I
I'm
don't
saying
like
it is.
the
I'm saying
culture of
that they're
Ukraine
using-
or of Russia.
That's anti-Semitic.
No,
Look
there's
at-
nothing.
look
There's
at-
nothing
look at-
wrong with their culture. There's nothing wrong with the culture of
what
Russia.
about the-
plenty wrong with
What
both.
is problem is we've got a corrupt, lying, now I believe sociopath in control.
Well,
the people that are suffering the
talking
most at
about
the
the
moment
Prime
are the
Minister
Russian
like that.
people.
Ukraine
The
is-
people that are suffering are the Russian
Ukraine
people.
is said to be one of the most corrupt.
That's what I'm just.
I mean, you can ignore it if you want to, I
Well,
guess.
there is
Ukraine is
there is
one of
more
the most-
freedom and dealing with corruption in Ukraine now
not saying much,
than
my
there
friend.
is in
That's not
Russia,
saying
which is
much.
another reason that
They're both
Putin has
pretty
gone
awful.
in, because he doesn't want the corruption to be sorted in Ukraine.
But he
He
had a-
doesn't want the freedoms to be sorted in Ukraine. Same reason he didn't want the freedoms to come about in Belarus, which is why when there was a big potential revolution happening in Belarus, they clamped down on it,
Do you know that
because Putin could not have stood for that.
Did you know that the British PR company Bell Pottinger was a client of the dictator of Belarus?
You
No,
keep
but why do you
cherry
ignore
picking
this?
these little
Why do you
connections
ignore
with
this
Britain.
essential information about
It's
your own
not
country?
essential.
Do you not care
It
about what your
feeds
own
into
country-
your
Do
narrative.
you not care about what your
it
own
feeds
country's up
into
to?
your ideologically driven, obsessive
Do you not hate,
narrative.
do you want to bring down the elite elites in this country as well that are corrupting the world? You don't care about your own country's elites?
See, this is far leftist, far rightist, conspiratorial nonsense.
Fine,
New
call it
World
whatever you want.
Order, the Illuminati.
Can I ask
This is
ask
what's
you
his
something?
name?
Do you know
Isle of Wight.
do you know
What's his
David
name?
Icke?
This is David Icke
Fine,
nonsense.
can you slam-
This is
smear
David
me
Icke
and-
nonsense.
slander and smear
You are
me
an
all you want.
anti-capitalist.
Can I get up and
who-
speak?
No, you're an anti-capitalist who hates success, and you have to drive this conspiratorial Illuminati nonsense that David Icke. That's all you're doing.
I'll let you
That's
speak.
all
Can I get up
doing.
and speak now? I'll let you
No,
on.
in a bit.
Survive with
I'm
it.
going. Exactly. But you are. You're a David Ickeist.
What about...
Aren't you?
It's a
You're an
smear.
anti-capitalist.
Smear. I'm
You're
an
an anti-capitalist.
but
All
not
the
David
elites
Icke.
are evil.
Steve,
I don't believe in David Icke's
Stevie,
bullshit.
what about...
very close. I
don't believe
What
in any of
about
his
all...
rubbish.
wait
You
a
blame
minute.
the elitists, the
Steve.
global
Talks
elitists.
about reptoids and stuff.
But you're talking about global elitists
Stevie.
that are
You do the
controlling the world.
With the fucking European Union, we do the same shit.
Stevie, what have we got to...
Stevie, baby.
What have we got to say about these refugees on the border, crossing the border, and racism is blatant?
Yeah, it's true.
All the black people, you know, that's what they're.
I've seen some of
That's
that
their.
footage,
That's
yeah.
their
No,
wonderful culture, you know. That's their culture.
No, they let
Well,
the
all-
Ukraine,
no,
they let the white
the men
refugees
are
through
not
much
being
more
allowed
easily
to
than the
leave.
black ones.
When they stopped
White,
men between the
black,
ages of 16
no,
and 16, they've got to go and
I
fight.
know that.
That's a
And
different.
those
No,
video
they,
footages were
they
black men.
specifically let white ones ahead of the black ones. It's very racist, dude. Even he admits it.
Truth goes out the window. So
The
all
fog of
sides,
war, the
all
fog of
sides,
war,
Peter,
indeed.
what do you
all
think of Peter
sides
Hitchens now talking about Ukraine?
propaganda.
Propaganda on
I've
both
seen a few
sides.
headlines.
You,
No,
ask him
Peter
what he
Hitchens,
thinks.
someone that you
I like
traditionally
Peter
agree
Hitchens.
with.
I like
Really?
Peter Hitchens. I'm
Well,
not a
I think-
monarchist, but I like
He
him.
was a
He's a true. Unlike you, he's a true.
I'm a
I
mark.
think he's a shit.
When have I ever said I'm a... You can
I'm
go
a
to the
Marxist.
toilet, they're over
I'm
there.
a Marxist.
When have I ever said I'm a
That's a
conservative? When have I ever said I'm a conservative?
Hitchens is a shit.
Mr. Farron.
Which Lenin do you like?
Mr. Farron.
Yes.
When have I ever said I'm a true
What are you, a
conservative?
centrist? You said.
Sorry?
Are you a centrist? You say you're a centrist? So you like
Classical liberal.
Jordan Peterson, clean your bedroom, wash your penis. Kind of centrist.
I've never heard Jordan Peterson talking about watching
Talks all
penis.
about it all the time. Putting up Soviet stuff in his house. You're far more worried about the Soviet threat than the Ukrainian neo-Nazis.
I'm worrying about corrupt totalitarian tyrants.
So why not talk about the ones in Ukraine?
That's it.
Britain.
Because the Ukraine as a nation, as the people, are the ones that are suffering, that are being killed.
So are Russians. They're being sent to die and they don't even want to die.
As I said earlier, that I feel very sorry for the Russian people because they've got a kleptomaniac madman who's removing their freedom.
You mustn't forget
There
that
was more. I've said this before. There was more investment today in the FSB than the KGB ever had.
Do you accept
They are monitored. They're now using social media to monitor. Contacting, which is the Russian Facebook, was bought by the Russian authorities. It's one of now
Do you know
their
that
main-
Russia's allowed pirating now? They've allowed,
Say again?
do you know because of all the boycotts in Russia, the Russian state have allowed pirate websites to go
Well,
But that's real freedom,
but
my
also,
friend. That's real freedom.
But
right there.
also Putin wanted to control the internet. He wanted to create a VPN for Russia,
I mean,
basically.
big companies like Google want to do the same thing. They're not as badly.
You're aware of the Navalny
Navalny, of course.
situation. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a bit suicidal to go back to Russia after.
He's suicidal.
I mean,
he's not a hero.
No, it's heroic, but it's a bit. I mean, I don't know why he did it. I don't know why he did it. He knew he was going to get imprisoned. Did he just want to make a point?
It's
very heroic.
But what the Russian state has done.
The way they
to
treat gay people is terrible. It's horrendous. I don't agree with it at all. It's not that I have a thing against Britain. I just think it's important to
You, but every twist and turn you choose to bring up. But what about the British? What about
it's your government.
It's yours
You
too.
have more of a stake.
You
in
South
your-
African or British?
I've got dual Irish South African citizenship.
Not British.
I'm British residency in this country.
No system.
That doesn't mean I can't criticize it's my country.
Of course it does.
It's my country.
I'll just probe.
I've lived here for 20
Am
years.
I allowed to probe?
I lived here for 20 years. I came here as a refugee.
Came here as a
I
baby.
came here as an economic refugee from South Africa.
There's a woman over there who's a refugee who's persecuted every single week who they attempted to murder her.
But look,
8 months ago.
he says you look like Christopher Tugendhat.
Christopher who?
Tugendhat! The uncle
Very,
of,
very good looking.
the uncle of, the uncle of Tom, he was a commissioner for Europe. The uncle of Tom.
why don't you know who that man is, Steve?
Sorry?
Why do you not know who that is?
Because
You
I'm
don't care about
obviously,
politics?
what do you
He's a
call them?
whippersnapper.
And
He's
it's
only
walking
about 20.
encyclopedia.
You've got to remember.
I think the man is flirting.
You're under the age of 50, that's probably why.
You've got
I
to
got
remember,
potatoes.
you must remember that Ukraine was a former Soviet Socialist republic, as was Armenia.
But before that, it
as
wasn't.
was
Now it
Poland.
isn't. It's
I
irrelevant.
don't know.
is
It never
I
existed
don't know if
before
it-
that.
Irrelevant.
No, nothing
It did. Kiev was the
He's a
capital.
student
Yeah, but not really.
Ukraine
Ukraine is only about 20 years old.
He's a student of history.
No, it's not that. It's a very new country.
Niall is
Even
a
relic.
student of history. He should know a little bit about history.
Even though really.
You look a bit white, like you've seen a ghost.
Not everybody who can get into golf.
It's racist. Yeah.
What's this lady? What's this Russified lady doing here?
Russified?
Yeah.
But anyway, the latest
Reincarnation.
news.
Do you
Now
accept
our
the
friend has
concept of
arrived.
reincarnation? Do you accept the concept of
Be
reincarnation?
careful, there was
No,
a
of
woman
course.
You
stabbed
don't.
here
Okay.
some
Some people,
Do I look a bit
some,
silly?
no, some people reckon.
No, anyway, no. I've got one
Putin-
final chapter, and then
Putin
I'll
is
do
the
that.
reincarnation.
We do have hope now,
Russia?
because Israel are going to save the day.
How are they going to do that?
You're not aware of this?
I'm not aware.
So yesterday, breaking Shabbat, the Prime Minister of Israel flew to Moscow, then he flew on to Berlin, and he's gone back to Israel, and he's brokering peace between Russia and
Wasn't
Ukraine.
China trying to do that as well?
Not that I've heard of.
China, I think, wanted to do a peace thing as well.
I think they hadn't particularly come out supporting Russia, but I don't think they've actually done
Do you
it.
think it's going to help Israel? Because Israel has a good relationship with Russia.
And it's very strong to Ukraine as well.
What
not least
about the
'cause there's lots of
Israeli
Jews
attempt
in
to sort
Ukraine.
this out?
That's what I'm just saying, if you listen.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was
Try and
talking,
listen
I was
to me.
talking to my Jewish friend here. Sorry.
I don't like that.
I'm trying to overthrow you now.
I'm going to be overthrown by
I'm
the
gonna topple you down.
young
Take my hand, you
communists.
can come down.
What, should we talk about how many people communism has murdered over the years? Shall we?
An idea can't.
But it's very rarely talked about. The fact that Stalin
it's very
murdered more
rarely.
than Hitler.
It's very rarely talked about. It's one of the most discussed things in
I've
recent
seen
history.
men in this park flying hammer and sickle flags. Would anyone get away with flying a swastika flag? Yet these young fools,
Buddhists
these
and
young
Hindus.
fools think it's trendy to be
I
communist.
think Buddhists will get away with flying swastika flag. Hindus. See, it's all
Get
about
it
context.
right.
It's all about context.
So anyway,
I enjoyed that.
so you're not going to talk about communism?
I'm going
are
to get
you?
up and talk about communism.
You once said you were near a communist. You once said you were a Marxist.
Hang on, he had 2 minutes left. He paid for 2 more minutes. Don't you? No, he went for the full package, didn't you?
What have we got
I've
to
had
say?
many accusations leveled at me. I like David Icke.
He likes David Icke. That's a great way to start.
And I'm anti-British.
Oh, you're
None
not
of
anti-
British.
You're not anti.
I love this country.
You're
I love
anti-British.
everybody else.
Welcome to Britain.
You wait for
Including
Putin
Steve.
to get here, and then
He's
you
anti-British
say it.
from the Hyde Park.
I love everybody in this country. Even Boris Johnson. I've condemned Putin. I've condemned the Soviet Union.
Don't get the British. Come on. That's all right.
But you get annoyed at me when I mention key facts.
Key facts?
Yes, key facts. Like for example, according to one Daily Mail article, Sir Richard Dearlove was interviewed. He was asked about Putin. He used to be the head of MI6. And he, Sir Richard Dearlove. Richard Dearlove was asked,
He was KGB.
how did Britain help Putin get to power? So Richard Dearlove said it was one of the worst mistakes. So I get told it's all Britain's fault. No, I
That's
I
going to be
love
the
this
theme
country.
of the next 20 minutes.
If you're a real friend to somebody, you tell them when they're doing something wrong. You don't just paper it over and ignore their bad side. And that's why I try and do this to Britain. It's my country. Like I came here when I was very, very young. I basically consider myself of this country now.
Putin was a minicab
And I try to be a
driver.
real friend to this country and try and point out its
We have
crimes.
to consider you as well.
I don't like to just glorify Britain. There's already happening that plenty of it all the time. What I like to do is
Where is this glorification of Britain?
endless war memorials, endless condemnations,
War memorials.
endless
And those war memorials.
endless
Can you
commemorations.
imagine a country having war memorials? Have you not been to Moscow much? Have you not seen the memorial of the
can't stand it.
Moscow has quite a
Being a
few war
disturber.
memorials. Yes.
It's very black and white. If you're somehow criticizing Britain's role in this terrible
Everything isn't
conflict,
black and white.
then somehow Putin, you're a stooge for Putin. If you're criticizing Britain and NATO's role in perpetuating this disaster in Ukraine, no, you can condemn both sides. Why not condemn both? It's like during the Vietnam War in the US. Plenty of
I
people.
heard NATO wasn't bombing Kiev.
Oh, but NATO bombed Serbia in 1999 and 2000.
They're helping
Triggering off a massive execution
killed by a racist.
And people wonder why Serbia has now come out and supported Putin. After NATO bombed the shit out of Serbia, blowing up telecom
They were
towers.
being racist to the Albanians. They were killing
Why do you hate Albanians
Sorry,
so much?
Saudi Arabia is plenty
They were
racist.
killing
We
the
don't bomb the shit out of them. Saudi Arabia only just allowed Israelis into the country on visas 2 years ago. That's about as anti-Semitic as it can get in the modern era. And Britain is happy to support Saudi Arabia.
Where did this come from?
Where does it come from? You jump around. Very relevant. It's very relevant.
Well, last I heard Putin bombed the Holocaust memorial. That pretty much is anti-Semitic.
Sure. And like I pointed out, Britain helped Putin get to power. That's something we shouldn't forget.
How?
I said, so Richard Dearlove asked Tony Blair to go to the opera with Vladimir Putin and his wife. I'm giving the
He took
facts.
him to the opera.
And the moment I give the facts, I get shut down.
He went to the effing opera.
Or the Barbara.
Steve, this is a moment where he's actually going to give us
I
some
gave you
facts.
no
Oh, no,
promises.
no, no. It was a soap opera. It was a soap opera. It was Coronation Street.
No, it was the Russian opera.
Coronation Street.
Tony Blair was a...
I want a Minister of War reinstated.
I think the fact is I'm telling some very important truths and you don't want to hear them, so you're shutting
We
them
have a
down.
Minister.
I think if
Hang
you
on a
want-
minute, hang on a minute.
Minister of War.
Of course they want to. Look, if he, I think if Steve was truly confident in defeating what I'm saying and shooting it down, he'd let me finish. But the fact is, this is all valid information. He doesn't want to get out, so he's not letting me speak. Fine, yeah, call it whatever you want. Tony Blair was asked by Sir Richard Dearlove of MI6 to go to the opera with his family, to go with Sherry Blair to the opera with Putin. All the while Putin was bombing Grozny in Chechnya, leveling the city to the ground, ordering his... Again, interrupting me. Again, I haven't even
Was he
spoken
in
a
power
second.
then or not?
I haven't even
You said
spoken
we brought
30
him to
seconds and I'm
power.
already getting interrupted. That is how...
No, 'cause I'm
That is
pointing
how
out
inconvenient this
inconsistencies in
information
what
is.
you're saying.
That is how inconvenient this information is for NATO
Was
stooges.
Putin in power already?
The fact... No, he wasn't.
So how was he bombing Grozny?
He was head of the... He was organizing the military at that time, okay? He was in the military.
driving
I don't know
really?
exactly know his title. I don't know what
Well,
title
there's a
he's
surprise.
holding. But he was coordinating the destruction of Chechnya.
was
And then when he
driving
came to power,
minicab.
he increased the destruction of Chechnya.
We've now got the straw man.
When he came to power, he even ramped it up. And you know what Tony Blair came out and said in the media? He said, I think I am more understanding of the Russian position than anybody else. This was after Russian soldiers were going into Chechnya, rounding men up, raping them in front of their families, tying them to trucks on Putin's orders. Putin was sending these men in to go and terrorize Chechnya.
Evil.
And Britain knew this was happening the whole time. After after the Skripal killings, Britain was still selling military equipment
And
to
going
Russia.
to the opera.
Britain was selling millions of pounds worth of military equipment to Russia, what the British government calls dual-purpose equipment. I'm not here to bash Britain. I think this is what a real friend to Britain does, is gets up and criticizes Britain's mistakes. Would you rather have a friend who just agrees with you and does whatever you say all the time and goes along with your mistakes? Or would you rather have a friend in your life who says to you when you're doing something wrong and tries to help you out? An honest friend, not a yes man. I prefer to be that to Britain. I think if you really care about Britain, you don't just celebrate its good things, which are very valid, great achievements we had.
You never talk about
But
it.
also, we need to focus as well on the problems that are generated by Britain. Support for the Russian oligarchs, letting them funnel their money and launder it through the City of London, sending their children to our public schools in Britain. Not only that, but like I've said, selling military equipment to Russia, even after the Skripal attacks, even after Salisbury. Again, it's information that's very inconvenient to hear, I know for some people, but Britain has done a lot to perpetuate this crisis. The British Army has been helping to train up soldiers in Belarus as well. It only stopped about a year ago, but Britain was happy to sell
All
train
hail
them up.
Lukashenko.
If you're interested in more, you can find out on
Nice
Declassified
chap,
UK.
Lukashenko. Great man.
British PR companies like Bell Pottinger were doing public relations for Lukashenko.
Great
They
man,
were happy to do
Lukashenko.
public relations to try and rehabilitate his image. Now Britain is, I'm not saying that this makes Britain the bad guy and Russia the good guy. That's ridiculous.
you are, right.
Russia is reprehensible in what they're doing to Ukraine, what they've done, like you mentioned very rightly, Georgia, Crimea, Chechnya, all of it in violation of international law. All of it, the violation of sovereign states, just as Tony Blair invaded Iraq and a violation of sovereignty, we have to criticize Russia as well.
We're not saying a bit of Iraq.
What
is
I'm here
British,
to say, though, is that
we're
I'm here
not saying that quarter of Iraq is Britain.
And listen,
we've never done that.
I agree
Well,
with
not
you.
for quite a long time.
I agree with you that the far
We
right,
did do it a long time.
very strong elements of the far right and the far left have somehow started to support Putin on this. The far right think that somehow
You're just
Putin,
copying my script.
No, I'm agreeing. I just said I agree with you. It's right. Some elements of the far right think Vladimir Putin will end global homo and bring about a new traditional utopia, Christian utopia, where everyone will be assigned a wife, a beautiful traditional wife. There are a lot of people on 4chan who believe this, okay? And then there are the people on the left, and I've met them, my good friend George is one of them, who think, oh, base Russia taking back the borderlands, right? There's plenty of rubbish on both sides, I'm not denying that. It's completely right to try and sift your way through it. But I'm also critical of the liberal, centrist, selective humanitarianism. Like I said to James earlier today, the arch heckler of Speaker's Corner, I said to him, where were you when Saudi Arabia was bombing Yemen with British weapons? 5 different types of cluster bomb being used by the Saudis, sold to them by Britain, used on Yemeni hospitals, Yemeni airstrips, all under the massive condemnation of the United Nations. That is a war you can do something about directly because it's your government.
So Britain
That's your
has produced
government.
cluster bombs, is that what you're
It
saying?
wasn't just selling weapons.
Were we selling cluster bombs?
British
Is that what you're
commanders,
just saying?
British commanders
You're
were
saying
in the
British
command
are
rooms in Saudi
manufacturing
Arabia.
and selling cluster
British
bombs.
British
Is that what you're
aircraft were
saying?
helping to
Kyle,
refuel and
Kyle,
restock.
I'm trying to hold you down on a point here. Are you saying Britain has manufactured and sold and traded cluster bombs?
Yes, I have. I'm
Really?
happy to email you the link.
Which
Anybody who wants,
manufacturer?
I'm not bringing out
What
my
was
phone.
the manufacturer?
I'm not bringing out my phone to check Wikipedia or whatever. I'm gonna happily, if anybody wants to come to me later and ask for my email, I'll email you all the links for my research. I'm happy to provide citations for every single comma, every single paragraph of what I've said. I'm happy to do that. I don't just come to Speaker's Corner like with nothing. I try and do my research.
We know that.
All right.
Some of us had jobs for us.
Now you should. I have a job as well. I work 45 hours. I now have a job. I moved out of my mother's house. I've moved out of my mom's house, and I now have a job.
Oh no, we're getting to the
All
live
right.
story.
Does your mother know you're doing this?
You know, I don't understand the selective liberal humanitarianism. Like I said, it's selective. When another foreign state, evil Russia, is doing a crime, we get up bravely at Speaker's Corner and we criticize a foreign country many thousands of miles away. We're happy to be bravely doing that. The really brave thing is what the Russians are doing in Moscow and in St. Petersburg, getting up and resisting Putin's terrorism. Again, they're criticizing their own government. That is what we should be doing here. We should be focusing on the crimes of our own government. That doesn't mean ignoring the crimes of, say, America, Saudi Arabia, Russia, China. All of that stuff is obvious. But the really brave thing to do in an honest citizen of a country focuses on the crimes of their own government. You have a direct stake in what your own country is doing.
We did this in our history. We came to the streets in our hundreds of thousands over the Iraq War and everything.
2 million.
So we did it. So we have criticised our own policy in the past.
We have. That was a great achievement. That was a great achievement. And you know, that actually did a lot of good. Some people think, oh, well, 1 million people marched against the Iraq War, it did nothing. Okay, yes, it did nothing to stop the Iraq War. But you know, there's been a declassified paper from the Ministry of Defense that found out, well, in the paper from the Ministry of Defense, it's written directly after those protests. And the plan was to invade Lebanon, Syria, Libya directly after invading Iraq. And you know what? They said they can't do that. Public anti-war sentiment is so high, they can't do it. So protesting works. That's why people like Steve get out and protest about vaccinations. That is why people protest about the Iraq War. It does work. Anybody who says here at Speaker's Corner, oh, talking doesn't do anything. We need deeds, not words. No, demonstrations. Walk upon England. Why are you derailing us? It's a beautiful song. And by the way, an anti-war song. When William Blake wrote those lyrics, when William Blake wrote the lyrics to that song, Jerusalem, he was talking about a land of peace. The word Jerusalem refers to peace. The land means peace. He was talking about Jerusalem means peace.
It's a place.
Yeah, it's what it refers to. William Blake, when he wrote the words to that beautiful poem, he was talking about England making England a land of peace. He wasn't talking about literally rebuilding Jerusalem in England. All right, it was a metaphor for making Britain a peaceful
Yes,
country.
it was.
And I'm convinced that the average British person is a peaceful person. However, it takes massive amounts of wartime propaganda blitzes against the public to rile them up, telling them lies, downplaying the crimes of countries like Ukraine and overplaying the crimes of countries like
You just say countries like
St.
Ukraine.
Petersburg, a football team
For example, Ukraine ranking lower than Russia on corruption. For example, Ukraine ranking one of the lowest on corruption in the whole of Europe.
I believe that, yes.
For example, Ukraine banning a British history book. There was a British history book by the conservative historian Anthony Behaviour wrote a book about Stalingrad, and you know that the Ukrainians banned it from being published in Ukraine. They banned the Russian translation, Ukrainian translation. Do you know why? Because Anthony Behaviour was speaking about how the Ukrainian militia during World War II killed 90 Jewish children. They exterminated 90 Jewish children in a region in South Ukraine. Now, in the current climate, I don't think Ukraine is a neo-Nazi state, but it has a strong neo-Nazi element. Much stronger than in Britain.
I said that 20 minutes. I said that.
I agree with you. It doesn't make it a neo-Nazi state, but there are armed battalions like Azov Battalion that use SS imagery like it's no problem. Now, yes, definitely there's a strong fascist element.
Paramilitary.
And then people say, well, there's a Jewish head of state in
private
in
paramilitary
Ukraine.
group.
It's very much integrated into the mainstream army.
it's not.
Britain was happy to support this. This is what I don't understand: the selective bias in this country about anti-Semitism. We'll go after Jeremy Corbyn for supposed anti-Semitism, which, when every case was investigated, didn't exist.
Well, no.
We'll go
The
after
Equality
him
and Human Rights Commission didn't agree with you
simply
there, did
because
they,
he
Carl?
criticised.
The Equality and
Simply
Human
because he
Rights
criticises
Commission
Israel.
found him guilty.
And then when Boris
Party.
Johnson,
Do you know more
when
than
Boris
the Equality
Johnson,
and Human Rights Commission?
when Boris Johnson starts cozying up to Saudi Arabia, one of the most anti-Semitic regimes in the world, like I said, they only allow Jews to enter the country on
Did you not
visa.
read the
2
Equality
years
and
ago,
Human Rights
no one
Commission?
has any problem with that. And when Britain is supporting the Azov Battalion in Ukraine, helping to fund and support the
How are
Ukrainian
Britain
militia,
supporting the Azov?
they've done it. They did it.
Paramilitary group?
Britain have worked very closely in Ukraine. Actually,
Not
both.
with the paramilitary group that
Both.
you're referring
Britain
to.
has a history of supporting both
So you're just
pro-Putin
making
and
it up.
anti-Putin
You're
sides.
making it up. You're
I can
making
give you all the
associations.
citations. I'll give you all
So
my
Britain
citations.
directly funded
What's your email
Azov.
address? What are you doing this weekend? We'll go out for a drink and I'll show you. We'll go out for a drink and I'll show you. No, I'm happy to show you. I'm not going to get my phone out now and start researching
Why not?
stuff. No, I'm sorry, that's not what Speaker's Corner is about.
It wasn't just about good
Britain, when Yanukovych in Ukraine was killing his own people in the Euromaidan protests, the protests that were trying to get Ukraine closer to
so
Europe
he was behind
and
the
away from
snipers,
Russia.
was he?
Do you know that Britain was sold more than £1 million worth of sniper rifles and weapons
There we
sights
go.
to
You got that reference out last week, and it showed the amount of money you're quoting was not for sniper rifles.
That was for Russia. Britain also sold military equipment to Russia, even after the Salisbury poisonings. Britain was happy to sell weapons, dual weapons with a military purpose, to Russia. This gives you an idea about the nature of the British elite. It's about as two-faced and perfidious as it gets. All right? Yeah, and I think we can agree on that. Maybe we disagree about what the best alternative is, but at least we agree. I'll give you the example of China. I've spoken about this before. You were right to bring up how China dominates Hong Kong, how China dominates Tibet, they've intimidated Taiwan, and the worst of all, the massive concentration camps they've set up to kill the Uyghurs and persecute the Uyghurs. But in that entire time, in the last 3-4 years, Britain has sold more than £2.4 billion worth of military-related equipment to China. Absolutely no problem. And about £50 million worth of that is exactly just directly for the military. This gives you an idea of the nature of the British state. I honestly think you honestly believe everything you're saying, and I respect you for that. I disagree with you, but you at least believe what you're saying. The British elite, on the other hand, will go to the cameras and say to everyone how sad they are about the Uyghurs, all the while licensing the export of arms to China. Licensing the export of sniper rifles to pro-Putin stooges in Ukraine like Yanukovych. Licensing military equipment with a dual purpose to go to Russia, Putin's Russia. All the while condemning those countries.
It's different.
This gives you an idea of how two-faced this country really is. Now my voice is starting to break out. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it, guys. Steve, do you want to get up and speak? Come on, get up. Thank you for listening, guys. I appreciate it. Steve,
Got to remember that St. Petersburg, a football team.
peace out.
What's your name? Kyle, Josh. The straw man, what you said about
So let me tell you about the animals.
it wasn't because of his criticism of Israel, it's called anti-Semite. It was because of his comments in defense of the Muslims and about his replaying of Black September Tunisia.
I agree maybe it was a bit of a misspoken thing. I'm not a huge fan of Trump. In many ways, it was much weaker.